to 5 Acres Honey Farm. I'm Tara Lynn. I have a few quick announcements before I share of the drama of honey extraction day and some things that I'm going to do differently at the next extraction, which I think would be also helpful for other folks that might experience what I experienced. One is I am totally sold out from this honey extraction. This is from my Pittsboro apiary, which is in the Piedmont area of North Carolina. This year's harvest is Piedmont Bloom. So Pittsboro is located in the Raleigh-Durham Chapel Hill area, and I still need to extract honey from my mountain apiary near Bryson City. So if you are interested in getting updates on when that's available, I have a link in the description where you can sign up. I don't send a weekly or monthly newsletter or anything like that. I just send updates when honey is available. It is first come, first serve. One thing that I do take pre-orders for, and I don't really like using the term pre-order because anything can happen and the harvest may not happen, but I have got, these are really popular for client appreciation gifts, party favors, and different events. I did have a pre-order of these size for a few dozen of these for a small business that they're doing client appreciation gifts. And if you're curious for a future harvest, just reach out to me directly, also in the description, and let me know. And that way you get first priority over before I start bottling orders that open to the public. My niece is turning 1 next month, so for her first birthday, and as you might know, you're generally not supposed to have honey before you're 1 year old. So for her first birthday, everyone's getting some honey favors, and this is a 1.5 ounce jar. So it's TSA friendly. This is a 4 ounce jar, not TSA friendly. So a really great option if you've got guests who are flying in and they want to be able to take that home. So I also, these were the first jars that I bottled before I worked on anything else. But the other sizes that I do are a 2 pound and a 1 pound. I did finish bottling, but I have not labeled everything yet. So things are moving along, and all this harvest honey pickups are all scheduled, so they're all spoken for. But again, if you wanted the pre-orders for the next one for any special events, there's a link in the description. I also shared in my last video, because it's coming up, so I just want to keep plugging it, the North Carolina State Beekeepers Association, their summer conference, which is in Flat Rock, just south of Asheville. I'll be presenting on Saturday of that conference what natural beekeeping means to you. So lots of different things to cover in there, but a lot of my presentation is new content. So if you have heard that before at a different club, it's probably a good one to stop by and visit and learn some new things. I extracted honey Memorial Day weekend. I waited till about noon to start getting the supers off the hives because I do use a fume board, so I really want to have the sun directed on it. And it was a beautiful day. It was supposed to be fairly mild weather. It was actually hotter than expected, which was very challenging. But one thing that I'm going to do differently next year is I'm going to, and I use these nuke boxes, these like Pro Nuke boxes. They come in a few different colors. I use them for many different things and not for nukes. That's actually when I was buying a bunch of these at one of the beekeeping stores. They're like, oh, you're gonna get a bunch of nukes ready. I'm like, nope, not one. So I use them because when the supers start getting full, they're just too heavy for me to lift. So I'll take half the frames out and put them in one of these nukes and have that aside, and then the super is half as heavy and I can move it aside. And oftentimes I need to then, take those frames, put them back in, and then fill up the nuke with the next box frame. So that's why I bought a few extras, so that I could just keep moving along with my inspections and not get interrupted with having to just shuffle frames around. So that's been really helpful. And what I'm going to do next year is I'm going to use these nuke boxes to pull the good extractable frames out in advance, so that I'm not lifting heavy boxes and running around, brushing bees off of frames in the heat, kind of like rushing to get it all done in one day. So I'm going to, in the week or two leading up to harvest, I'm going to selectively pick like the best frames from the different hives that I'll extract from and get them organized in the house, so that way they'll be ready to extract and I won't need to go through all this craziness. So that's one thing. And the reason I want to do that is I realized this was the first year I've had so many hives to extract from. Usually I extract from 2 or 3 different hives, maybe a few frames from a 4th hive, but I had 6 different colonies that I was extracting from, and to the best of my abilities in the week leading up to harvest, I organized the frames so that the best frames were on the top supers. But there's still some that I knew I wasn't going to be extracting, but I still had to lift them in that box, and it added to the weight. It also, it was hard then to have an idea of like, okay, how much am I going to be extracting? How much time is this going to take? Because I couldn't really see the specific frames that I was going to use. It also doubled the amount, oh, maybe not doubled, almost doubled the amount of time it took to get the boxes in the house. I don't want any bees in the house, so like I'm on my screened porch right now. I use the fume board, and that gets, which I have a story about, that gets most of the bees off of the hives, off of the frames in the hive. But there's still some bees left, and so then I'll brush them off frame by frame and get them loaded onto the porch, and then I triple check the frames before I bring them in frame by frame into the house. So it's a really cumbersome process. My story with the fume board, I have a separate video about these, but this is a little bee escape adapter. So on an inner cover that has this oval entrance, or I guess like hole in the center, and I have also complaints about in another video about how many of the inner covers today are built with a circle for a feeder, and so this isn't compatible. So it was a chore to find compatible inner covers this year, and an extra expense. So you put this right in the center, and then all the bees can go down into the lower boxes, but that way the supers become empty of bees. So this was like another way to preemptively get the supers ready for extraction. A few folks have commented about like really being careful when you use these, and don't leave them on for a long time, because if those supers are left kind of vulnerable and you've got small hive beetle issues, which I've historically had, then the beetles are just gonna go crazy in the honey. I put this on 2 days in advance, and one of the things that went wrong is that I only had 1 of these here. My other ones were all in my other apiary, so all of my planning over the winter did not go as well. I just, for whatever reason, I had decided to store them out there rather than here. So that's something I will plan in the future, is to make sure they're here over the winter, because I extract from here first. So I only use this in 1 hive, and what I learned is that the worker bees can fit through here, but the drones do not. And the drones eat 3 times as much as a worker bee. So my top supers were just completely full of drones, having a grand time. They couldn't leave because the whole the top is closed, so they literally could only get out through here, and they don't fit. So tons and tons of drones hanging out there for 2 days. They didn't really make a dent in the honey. That wasn't the problem. It was just then now all of these bees I need to get out of the supers, and putting the fume board on while this is in place underneath the supers doesn't solve anything, because those big boys can't fit through here. So it just created this extra issue. So I feel like I would definitely use these again, and I would really look to see like what the drone population looks like before I would put them on. If I'm really planning on relying on a fume board and being in the sun, I probably won't use this again. This was helpful last year at my mountain apiary, because those are in the shade, and so the fume board isn't as effective there because it's not in that full sun. So I found these to be much more effective there. So that was another learning. Many of the frames that looked great, and I'll just show you this example. This, you can see how fat this is. Super fat. This is not even as fat as some of the others in there. So there's all these really heavy frames, and they were just literally melting. Like as I was trying to brush the bees off and I'm like holding it, you know, trying to get them on the porch, it's just so heavy. And even though there's wired foundation in there, it was just, oh, it's just dripping now. Yeah, so it's a hot day. It's just falling out. And so if it's falling out stationary, if I put it in an extractor and it's gonna get spun around, it's just gonna blow out and ruin the comb. It's gonna be unusable. It's gonna cause the extractor to get all clogged up. So there were many frames just like this one that I did not extract from. And, you know, because of how wonky they are, and if you're not, you know, I'm not really going to the care of putting the frames back in the order that they were when I'm pulling them through the extractor. This is like one of the frames that I just couldn't fit back in the box to get back on the hive. So it's hanging out in the freezer and it'll be a treat for whatever hive needs it. But there's so much, I don't want to say wasted honey, but there's so much honey I could have harvested, but these frames just got huge. So something for the future is I'll know to move those giant frames into lower super, the lower supers, just to leave with the bees so I don't have to lift them. I don't have to worry about damaging the comb and having them clog up the extractor. So those will just be for the bees. And what I've done in the winter, when I've got those types of frames, when they're finally empty, is I'll take a knife and just go straight down the side and just cut off all that excess comb. And that generally helps keep things a bit more in line when I return it to the colony in the spring or the summer the next year. So that's something as another learning. I also may have shared about this before. I don't harvest wax from my colonies. So, you know, typically if you're uncapping your frames, it's very traditional to have an uncapping knife, and then you're collecting all the wax cappings that you can melt down and render and do whatever you like with. I don't have an interest in that. It just feels like a mess and a lot of labor that I'm not really interested in doing. So I use this uncapping roller, which, you know, you just roll it across the comb and it punctures, you know, holes in all of the cells, and that way when it goes through the extractor, the honey can just escape. It does make, you know, little flakes of wax, so you are gonna still have like a wax collection if you want, which I just use like a larger particle filter when it drains into the buckets. But what I experienced this year, and it's happened before, but just I guess on the scale of this year of how many frames I was uncapping, this just becomes like a solid surface of wax. Like you don't see any spikes. And so, I mean, just imagine taking a lint roller and trying to uncap the honey frame. It's not going to be effective. So in between each whole extraction cycle, I would have a knife and then just have to scrape through every single one of these rows, get as much wax off as possible, expose these spikes, and then go through another set of frames and then keep that going. So that was a lot of stopping and getting this in order, and then spinning. It's all hand cranked, so I don't have like, it's not like I could push a button and let a motor go while I clean this out. So I did have a few folks offer to help me next time. So I feel like this would be a nice activity for someone to just take this roller and get it clean while I am spinning the frame. So that might be something I do next year as well. The other thing that went wrong, and this is like the biggest thing, and I will not do this again, is, so I've always in the past, like when on the extraction day, I always put the supers back on the colonies at sunset. I don't want any of the wet frames around the house, and you don't really want to put them on during the middle of the day because the aroma, you know, can attract robber bees and hornets and different things. So I was trying to get everything done. So like I said, I started around noon. I didn't stop to have lunch or anything. I just was like, I realized like this is taking a long time. Around 3:30 is when I finally got all the frames in the house. So that's how long it took for me to do the fume boards and get the boxes in the truck and then each frame into the house. And then I started uncapping, spinning into the buckets and over and over and over. And it was nonstop. And it was around 8:15 in the evening and sunsets at 8:23, and I had 3 frames left. And I'm like, I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna get it done. I'll get the boxes back on the hives right before sunset. And I had in advance, fortunately, put tape on every super so that I knew which colony it went to. So I just needed to line them up and put them on the colonies. And of course, it's taking longer than I think. And I get out to the hives at like 8:40, 8:45. So it's really pretty much getting dark. I can't see too much. It's more like shadows and stuff. And the first colony, I got the boxes on. And as I got to the next colony, I felt something right here. And I'm wearing gloves and everything. Like my veil is taped down. I'm all suited up. And somehow there's like that ventilation little band on most gloves. She stung through the glove and it hurt really badly. You know, it's like right here in your wrist, you get it so close to the bone. And I was like, oh, now the alarm pheromone's going, but I had, you know, just a few more boxes to get on. So I'm like, let me just finish and I'll get inside. And so as I do that next colony, I feel it around this wrist. So it's like they've kind of just told each other, go for the wrist and go for the ventilation band. So this one wasn't as bad, multiple stings, but what had happened here, and so number one, I'm not going to take a gamble and ever go right after sunset and put the boxes on again. But I got half of the boxes on and then I just decided to abort. Like I realized like this is not safe. I could hear and somewhat see them like trying to get under my veil even though it was taped down, but in the past, like if I'm sweating a lot, like the tape comes off. And so I was just really nervous that, you know, they're gonna get under. So I abandoned everything. Fortunately, our truck bed has, it can be completely sealed. So I could leave everything on the truck bed and it's not open air. So nothing's going to be attracted to it. So everything stayed in there until sunset the next night. And I got everything back on the hives then. While I was wrapping that up and getting back to the house, it was about 20 to 30 minutes. I would say like 25 minutes from getting stung to coming in and changing and getting into the shower. And so when I took my glove off, the venom sac was in me, like still in me. That's why it was hurting so much. I've never experienced, like usually if I'm stung through a shirt or gloves, like I can just lift the material and it pulls the stinger right out. But this, she somehow was able to get through and it was just pulsing, so I was able to get that out. I will show you what my hand looked like. My sister was joking that it looks like the Nutty Professor's hand of like just totally inflated. Typically the way I react to a sting is within the first day it starts to get inflamed, but the worst inflammation is exactly 48 hours after the sting. And so that's when it was like the worst swelling. And then it takes about a week for it to die down. And then don't you know, exactly a week later, all the swelling and itchiness have subsided, and I decided to go and inspect the colonies, and then I got stung right here through my glove. So that wasn't as bad because I was able to just immediately pull the material up, but it has been itchy and a little swelly. Some things that I'll be doing differently, things that I did not expect to go wrong, where I thought I've got a long full day ahead and I could really get everything done, but turned out otherwise. But if you've got some tips for extraction day, please let me know in the comments and I will share more next time.